Hey there folks. Now if you're a longtime follower of my channel or a more recent follower of my channel, you'll know that kokanee and trout represent the bulk of content that I produce, and I primarily target those species from my kayak trolling. And trolling I still feel is probably one of the best ways to target both of these species, but because I started fishing from a kayak, I didn't have a downrigger on my first kayak. I now have at least one downrigger on one of my kayaks, but I still heavily rely on using either sliding weight rigs, which is what I started with, and now I've transitioned to snap weights to get down to kokanee and trout that are feeding at depth. And this is really critical for targeting these species because for most of the year, especially during the nicer times of the year to be fishing in the summer, all of these fish are deep. Now the greatest challenge in using these snap weights or sliding weights or even inline weights is that you have to figure out exactly how deep you are, and it is the most commonly asked question I get on any type of trolling video where I'm targeting these fish at depth. How do you know how deep you are when using lead? And there are many charts and tables available on the internet, and I've referenced those, but the problem with all of those is they do not tell you where this data originated from. Some of these charts and tables are quite different in their estimates and how deep you are. And a lot of them are not transparent about what diameter line they were using or what pound test line they were using and at what troll speeds they are designed to be used at. So I thought I'd remedy that by doing my own series of trials using a very expensive little tiny depth data logger here called the Census Ultra. Really tiny. It weighs just a little over an ounce, and it will record the depth to plus minus just 1 foot, so it's very accurate. It cost me about 250 bucks, plus I had to buy the downloader that I can actually attach that to and get the data onto the computer. So my goal with acquiring this device and going through these trials was to come up with a depth table or a depth chart that I could give to all of you that I would have confidence in, that was based on actual real world data that I controlled for as many variables as I could, and something that I could feel confident in sharing with you so that you can go out and confidently fish and target these kokanee and trout at depths of up to 70 feet without having to use anything more than a 5-ounce cannonball or less. Now before I go further, I wanted to let you know that I will be making these freely available to download in the description below. You can download a table version or a graph version, which I'm going to go over in this video. But if you can help out by hitting that super thanks button and making a small donation to help me recover the costs of producing this video and all of the gear I had to buy in order to do it, I would really appreciate it. Alternatively, you can also join as a community member by hitting that join button below, or go down in the description and become a patron as well. There's lots of other benefits with doing that, including get to go do some fish alongs with me, where I organize opportunities to go fish with my subscribers across the Northwest. Alright, let's just go over the methods that I did so that I can be clear and transparent about exactly what I did, and also address some of the underlying assumptions that I used when collecting this data. So as I said, I used this really tiny little data logger that I got from a company called ReefNet, and it is really lightweight, and I just clipped it onto the end of my line. And then I also clipped right next to it 1-ounce cannonballs, 2-ounce cannonballs, 3-ounce cannonballs, 4 and 5. And then I went out and collected data at 2 different troll speeds, at 1.2 and at 1.5, and I would let out 10-foot increments and hold it there for 30 seconds, and I did it from 10 foot all the way out to 150 foot. So I had 15 different measurements at 2 different speeds for 5 different weights. This took almost a whole day to collect this data. I was out there. I also was very careful. I went out to Lake Chelan on a very calm, glassy day It's an extremely deep, long, straight lake. So I could just go in a straight line. I didn't make any turns. I was trying to control for as much as possible. For my speed, I used my GPS on my Helix fish finder, and I targeted 2 different troll speeds. The first was 1.2 miles per hour, which I aimed for by staying between 1.1 and 1.3. So I was really shooting for an average. And for 1.5, I tried to stay between 1.4 and 1.6. And that was sort of the goal, to sort of just get a measure of averages. So I also had to take into account the fact that this little data logger has mass and it has its own impacts on the line itself. So I also took measurements of just the little data logger by itself. And I'll talk about why it's important that I did that in the next step. So after a long day on the water, I took my little data logger and connected it to my computer and downloaded all the data. Now ReefNet, the company that produces this data logger, also produces a software program called Census Manager, and that allows me to go in and look at that data, and I can select the little 30-second segments that I was holding it stationary at these different depths, and I can highlight them, and it gives me an average depth across that period of time. And so that's what I did for each and every one of those different weights and speeds and distances from the kayak. Now, the one real assumption I made in this approach is that I assumed that the interactions of the data logger's weight and mass as well as the cannonball's weight and mass was simply additive. Like there wasn't some sort of synergistic, non-linear response to how they sunk in the water column. So what I did, since I had data for just this data logger, I simply just subtracted the data logger alone data from the 1 ounce, 2 ounce, 3 ounce, 4 ounce, 5 ounces at each of those different distances from the kayak and different speeds. So that allowed me to account for the impacts of the data logger itself. So in the end, I was able to produce 2 products. One is a table approach, which some people might prefer. On the left-hand side, it will tell you the amount of line you have out, and on the top column, it gives you the amount of lead you have, and then you can simply look and see what depths you'll likely end up at 2 different troll speeds. So the top table will be for 1.2 miles per hour, and the bottom table will be for 1.5. Now the other product is a colorized visual chart representation of how the amount of line you have out and the amount of lead you had on affects at what depth you'll be. And on this one, the line out goes across the top, and then on the left hand side you're going to have the depth that you're at, and then there's 5 different colors representing the different weights from 1 ounce, 2 ounce, 3 ounce, 4 ounce, and 5 ounce. And this will just make it a little bit easier for those folks who tend to prefer more visual representations like that rather than maybe more complex data tables, which might be confusing to some. We all have our own preferences on how we interpret data, and hopefully one of these will make it easier for you to quickly reference things when you're out on the water. Now before I move on, I do want to kind of just quickly look at the results with you and kind of go over some things that I noticed right away in the data. Now, for the longest time, I've always been telling people when they ask me how do I estimate my depth, I always just say I made the assumption, and this was just based on some experience in the field and also referencing other charts and graphs similar to these, is that for every ounce at 100 feet at 1.5 miles per hour using 10-pound monofilament, which is what all these trials were done with, I'm getting between 10 and 15 feet of drop. And that turned out to be pretty close to the ballpark what I got with this experiment. So it does feel good to know that I wasn't misleading people all these years when I was making that suggestion. Now another thing you're going to notice, I'm going to put the colorized chart here, is that at the slow troll speeds of 1.2 miles per hour, when you start getting out to 120, 130 foot of line out, especially with the lighter 1 to 2 ounce weights, you really start to plateau. And I think it's just because the overall drag on the line itself is overcoming the pull of gravity on your gear. And I'm sure that dodger design and weight and shape will impact ultimately where you end up in the water column. But that's something that I can explore later with additional experiments using this data logger, and I do fully intend on doing that. And the other thing I really wanted to point out is with trolling at higher troll speeds at 1.5, once you get out to about 120, 130 feet, you really start getting diminishing returns. At that higher troll speeds, there's so much drag on the line and the weights themselves that you're actually coming back up in the water column. And so you really have to start push out to like 140, 150 feet before you really start getting a drop again. So to me, it seems like, if you want to maximize your depths, you're either going to want to go slower troll speeds, or if you're going to go at faster troll speeds, then you're going to need to use more weight out to about 110 feet. And then beyond that, beyond 110 feet, you might as well just add more weight if you need to get deeper, rather than trying to let out more line to get deeper. So beyond 110 feet, just add more weight, especially at higher troll speeds. Okay, like I said, all of these are going to be available to download for free in the description below. I'm also going to put links to my store where you can buy sticker versions of these in a 3x5 and a 5x7 sticker. I really recommend the 5x7. I think it's going to be a little bit easier to read, but if you're limited on space, then the 3x5s are fine. But you can just stick these somewhere in your boat or on a tackle box or something that you can quickly reference. That'd be great, and it's an easy way to always have that chart handy. Or you could just simply download these JPEGs, store them on your phone, print them, and laminate them yourself, and you can use them freely. Again, I would really appreciate any support you can provide by making just a donation through that super thanks, or becoming a patron or community member for just a short while to help recover the costs of doing this video. In the future, I'm going to be doing lots of additional experiments using this data logger. Like I said, I'm going to look at how dodgers affect and dodger shape and size affects depth. I'm going to look at how line diameter affects depth. And then I'm also going to start exploring some of the other fisheries like Chinook salmon fisheries, where a lot of us are using droppers on the Columbia River system and in Puget Sound and offshore when targeting those fish. And so I'll start looking at, how much weight are we getting down there with 360 flashers and with large paddle flashers and big like lure gents and dodgers, and trying to really sort out how to get down to depth when targeting with larger gear and much heavier braid. Anyways, that's it. Thank you so much to my current patrons and community members and everybody who has supported this channel. I really appreciate it. If you have any questions, concerns, or criticisms, I would love to hear them in the comments section below. And I'll see you next time out there on the water. And just remember, fish smarter, not harder.